Hello, students. This is Professor McCoy. This is April 1st, 2020, and it's Wednesday. And today we're going to talk about reparations. I hope that you all are keeping safe, practicing the social distancing and, just taking care of yourself and your friends and loved ones. So, reparations. Reparations, the making of amends for a wrong one has done by paying money to or otherwise helping those who have been wronged. So I provided you with a PowerPoint that cites the references. That's from dictionary.com. And then I have this other breakdown of reparations. Reparations for slavery is a political justice concept that argues that reparations should be paid to the descendants of slaves from sub-Saharan Africa who were trafficked to and enslaved in the Americas as a consequence of the Atlantic slave trade. The most notable demands for reparations have been made through the United Kingdom and the United States. And so that was from Wikipedia. And we've had this progression as far as where we've been. We covered Brown versus Board of Education 1 and 2, and Milliken versus Bradley. And now I assigned you to read Ta-Nehisi Coates' article, The Case for Reparations. And so Ta-Nehisi Coates, he did this article in 2014, and it was the Atlantic cover story. He's an American essayist, journalist, and writer who often explored contemporary race relations, perhaps most notably in his book, Between the World and Me, which won the National Book Award for Nonfiction. I pulled up a bio of him, so I'm going to read a little bit more of his bio. His mother was a teacher, and his father, once a member of the city's Black Panther chapter, was a librarian, entrepreneur, and publisher who founded Black Classic Press, which reissued forgotten works by African Americans. Coates' unusual first name was an Egyptian appellation for the ancient African region of Nubia. So I know anybody's been there. My parents have been to Egypt, so I know that's kind of exciting. His exposure to books as a youth prompted Coates to gravitate toward a literary career, and he started writing poetry at the age of 17. In 1993, he enrolled at Harvard University, but he left without a degree. Coates began writing for a variety of periodicals, including Washington Monthly, to which he contributed the attention-grabbing Confessions of a Black Mr. Mom, Philadelphia Weekly Monthly, Mother Jones, The Village Voice, Entertainment Weekly, Time, and O, and the Oprah magazine. His career blossomed in 2008 when he became a blogger for the Atlantic magazine's website. In his first byline, he criticized actor Bill Cosby, the patriarch of an upwardly mobile Black family in the television sitcom The Cosby Show from 1984 to 1992, as a crabby lecture circuit grandpa who cast aspersions on his less fortunate brethren. Coates' grasp of pop culture trends and his penetrating insights earned him a following. I know what they said about The Cosby Show. That was my show back in the day. I love The Cosby Show. I'm one of those who was raised in the Cosby era. Cosby Show, Coates' 2008 Time article, Obama and the Myth of the Black Messiah, reminded readers that the election of Barack Obama as the first Black U.S. president was not the cure-all for poverty and ghettos. Obama, Coates said, is a Black president, not Black Jesus. In his 2002 essay on the shooting death of Florida teenager Trayvon Martin, he commended Obama on his heartfelt response to the tragedy. Obama memorially said, "If I had a son, he'd look like Trayvon." I mean, as you know, that's our next book after we finish this. We're going to be reading Ben Crump's The Legalized Genocide of Colored People. So we're going to be touching on, that's going to be really exciting. Coates' Atlantic essay, Fear of a Black President, earned him a 2013 National Magazine Award. The 2014 cover story, The Case for Reparations, resulted in another National Magazine Award. In 2015, Coates was named a MacArthur Fellow. The following year, he was the recipient of the Penn Diamonstein Spellvogel Award for the art of the essay. In 2008, Coates published his first book, the memoir, The Beautiful Struggle, A Father, Two Sons, and an Unlikely Road to Manhood. The critically acclaimed work was followed by Between the World and Me 2015, which became a bestseller. It was written in the form of a letter from Coates to his teenage son and recounts the author's childhood in Baltimore's inner city, his daily fear of violence, and the emergence of the crack cocaine epidemic. The narrative leads to the controversial contention that the American society is structured to promote white supremacy. Many readers note that the book's relevance in a time of frequent high-profile racial incidents. In addition to the National Book Award, Between the World and Me won the Kirkus Prize for Nonfiction. In the essay collection, We Were 8 Years in Power 2017, which included work previously published in The Atlantic, Coates explored the presidency of Barack Obama as well as a subsequent election of Donald Trump. In 2019, Coates released his first novel, The Water Dancer. The book, which earned widespread acclaim, centers on a slave with photographic memory who aids the Underground Railroad. Coates' other fiction work included a comic series based on the Marvel superhero Black Panther. Black Power. I was a big Black Panther person. I love that movie. And so it says the first installment was published in 2016. So this source for this article on Ta-Nehisi Coates, this is from Karen Sparks, the editors of Encyclopedia Britannica. So that's Ta-Nehisi Coates. And I'm going to talk about some of the concepts that were addressed in the actual article and just a general overview. And then we're going to talk about specifically, they raise HR 40. So we're going to talk about that. And then we'll actually get into the meat and potatoes for the actual article. So some of the concepts for Ta-Nehisi Coates, the case for reparations, was he talked about kleptocracy, which is a government with corrupt leaders that uses their power to exploit the people and natural resources of their own territory in order to extend their personal wealth and political powers. Sound familiar? Restricted covenants, a covenant imposing a restriction on the use of land so that the value and enjoyment of adjoining land will be preserved. So, I mean, I know we'll get into more details of the actual article, but we followed the experience of Clyde Ross from his family from being sharecroppers in the South and dealing with, you know, racism and discrimination down South. And then they come to Chicago and you think everything's better. And then they experience redlining, restricted covenants, all kinds of racism. And so that was, you know, it was intense. So redlining is a systematic denial of various services to residents of specific, often racially associated neighborhoods or communities, either directly or through the selective raising of prices. So I know right now we're following all this stuff with the COVID-19, and our Michigan Attorney General has said that, you know, stores cannot, you know, to let her know if there are any stores that are raising prices, like price gouging and trying to take advantage, you know, she's got like you can go to her website and make a complaint if anybody's doing that. HR 40. This bill establishes the Commission to study and develop reparation proposals for African Americans to examine slavery and discrimination in the colonies and the United States from 1619 to the present and recommended appropriate remedies. And then there's this article, Congresswoman Sheila Jackson Lee introduces legislation for a commission to consider reparation proposals for African Americans. You know, as it accounts in the article, they talk about how John Conyers had previously introduced HR 40 legislation, and then when he left office, Congresswoman Sheila Jackson Lee took up the mantle. And she's quoted as saying, in short, the commission aims to study the impact of slavery and continuing discrimination against African Americans, resulting directly and indirectly from slavery to segregation, to the desegregation process, and the present day. The commission would also make recommendations concerning any form of apology and compensation to begin the long delayed process of atonement for slavery. Okay. Washington, D.C., Congresswoman Sheila Jackson Lee, a senior member of the House Committees on Judiciary, Budget, and Homeland Security, ranking member of the Judiciary Subcommittee on Crime, Terrorism, Homeland Security, and Investigations, issued this statement in the introduction of H.R. 40. And I've met her before. I met her a couple times, maybe 2 or 3 times. She is fierce. She is very strong and powerful. She is one of our fierce African-American female leaders. The impact of slavery and its vestiges continues to affect African Americans and indeed all Americans and communities throughout our nation, which is why I'm pleased to introduce H.R. 40, the Commission to Study and Develop Reparations Proposals for African Americans Act. This legislation is intended to examine the institution of slavery in the colonies in the United States from 1619 to the present and further recommend appropriate remedies. Since the initial introduction of the legislation, its proponents have made substantial progress in elevating the discussion of reparations and reparatory justice at the national level and joining the mainstream international debate on the issues. So, I mean, what I'll say there is, I've seen there's been discussion, folks from the Caribbean, talking about reparations. There's been a movement in Europe, in London, African folk in London that are talking about reparations. So this is like it's something for ADOS, us American descendants of slaves, but it's something that's been discussed globally. That are, for those of us that are African American, our ancestors built this country. We were raped, brutalized. We've studied in this course, we started with 1619, then we looked at the founding of the country, and we've seen how Blacks, we built this country, and how every war that there's been, we've been a part of the war. We're always contributing, whether we're paid or not. And this country has benefited off the backs of our labor and continues to benefit. And we've had ups and downs, roller coasters. We've had slavery, then we had the Civil War, then we had it was good. There was a period of time things were getting better with Reconstruction. Then you had Jim Crow, and you had the black codes and the racism, and then so things we start creeping up, things start to get better, and then you have discrimination. You see what happened with the civil rights leaders in the 60s. I look at Martin Luther King, where he saw the racism, the cancer of racism, and helped to bring it up, like rise it up and bring it to the surface. And he and the civil rights leaders did a lot. We heard about Reverend Lowry that passed the other day. They did a lot to help expose racism and try to eradicate it from our society. But it actually, what happened is it went down into the underbelly. It was hidden, and now it's resurfaced. And it's like we really gotta, I'm a spiritual person, so we gotta pray, we gotta do everything we can, we gotta speak up, we gotta do everything we can to just eradicate racism from our land. Just like we got this COVID situation, we want to pray, ask the Lord to heal us, eradicate this virus from our land. We want to eradicate racism, the cancer of racism from our land, because it hurts. It doesn't just hurt Black folk, it hurts everybody. It hurts the whole nation. You look at what's happened. We've talked in this course about what happened to Native Americans and Black folk, and our country is a country of justice, and so justice demands equity. And there's still issues with discrimination going on with Black folks. We talked about the criminal justice system, the disproportionate number of Black people that are incarcerated. We've talked about the education system, where there's disproportionate number of Blacks that are suspended, expelled from school. There's also, I might add, Native Americans and Hispanics that are expelled at a higher rate, which some might say that's why it might be a good thing for this COVID to have some folks may not need to go back to the school systems, because school systems are racist against Black, Native American, Hispanic children. So some people may opt to be doing, there's a movement to do some more homeschooling anyway. So I'm going to go back to the article. So then it says, though we were talking about international, like how this has been an international debate on the issues, though some have tried to deflect the importance of these conversations by focusing on individual monetary compensation, the real issue is whether and how this nation can come to grips with the legacy of slavery that still infects current society. Through legislation, resolutions, news, and litigation, we are moving closer to making more strides in the movement towards reparations. Today, there are more people at the table, more activists, more scholars, more CEOs, more state and local officials, and more members of Congress. However, despite the progress in the election of the first American president of African descent, the legacy of slavery lingers heavily in this nation. While we have focused on the social effects of slavery and segregation, its continuing economic implications remain largely ignored by mainstream analysis. These economic issues are the root cause of many critical issues in the African American community today, such as education, healthcare, and criminal justice policy, including policing practices. The call for reparations represents a commitment to entering a constructive dialogue of the role of slavery and racism in shaping present-day conditions in our community and American society. So again, I'm reading, this is from, this is Sheila Jackson Lee, as she's introducing the legislation. I believe that H.R. 40 is a crucial piece of legislation because it goes beyond exploring the economic implications of slavery and segregation. It's a holistic bill in the sense that it seeks to establish a commission to also examine the moral and social implications of slavery. In short, the commission aims to study the impact of slavery and continued discrimination against African Americans, resulting directly and indirectly from slavery to segregation, to desegregation process in the present day. The commission would also make recommendations concerning any form of apology and compensation to begin the long-delayed process of atonement for slavery. With the overcriminalization and policing of Black bodies a recurring issue in African American communities, I believe this conversation is both relevant and crucial to restoring trust in government institutions in many communities. As in years past, I welcome open and constructive discourse on H.R. 40 and the creation of this commission in the 116th Congress. Though the times and circumstances may change, the principal problem of slavery continues to weigh heavily on this country. A federal commission can help us reach into the dark past and bring us into a brighter future. So that's basically talking about, she's doing a press conference and introducing the legislation. And, in that, what we just reviewed, there's just a lot of discussions, and I've talked about this before, my experience as a criminal defense attorney. Right now we're seeing some things like, in the criminal justice system, there's a disproportionate number of poor people, Black people, working class folk, there are poor white people that are in the system, and the conditions are, in some places are, like in the jail, intolerable. There's some jails that they don't have running showers, they don't have soap. And, when you talk about these conditions, we've had some of our advocacy groups have expressed to the courts and the prosecutors, the judges, people about how the conditions are, or even, I've had clients that have said stuff to me and I've said stuff to the courts, and you've had some of the prosecutors and judges have not really been compassionate. Now there are some that have, but there are some that really haven't. I don't know if it's because they don't have a background as a defense attorney, or maybe they haven't had a loved one that's been in jail, but they really didn't get it when we were talking about the conditions, unsanitary conditions that people are left in. But now that situation is becoming a reality for everybody, because if you have, you're looking in the news with the coronavirus, you're seeing people that are confined in certain areas it's more likely, and if it's unsanitary, it's more likely to spread. So then you've seen what's happening. You've seen there's been, unfortunately, some deputies, police officers that have contracted it and passed away. There's court staff. There are people that are being affected by this virus, and, I don't wish ill will on anyone. I think we all need to do what we need to do, take care of our health, pray about it, meditate. I don't know if you're religious, spiritual, pray, meditate, do whatever you got to do to take care of yourself, practice social distancing. I would never wish ill will on anyone. But I think this pandemic is just really breaking it home for people, maybe some of those people that didn't have compassion when we would talk about the conditions that our clients are experiencing in the jails and the prisons in our country. And, I've talked about this before. We have this prison industrial complex that is disproportionately affecting, it was created, to oppress Black people, but it affects everybody. I've had white clients that are affected by it, and the conditions of the jail just are unsanitary. And it should, on a human level, we should have better conditions. I mean, we really, a lot of people should just not be locked up. You know, I'm not saying that if you do wrong, you shouldn't have consequences. That's why when I work with kids, I've liked some of the remedies that we've come up with the juvenile court. Like if somebody commits a wrong, making them do community service, making them write a letter of apology. Um, we got to do more restorative circles, restorative circles. Talk to the victims, find out how were they really wronged, and then what do they feel will make things better. Making the person do community service, making them write a letter. Some people need some severe psychiatric mental health treatment, so getting them treatment in that way. Financial, if they have the financial means, making them pay financially. But really, what I see with a lot of people over the years, I practiced for 18 years, is there are some people that some of the behavior that they have that's improper is some learned behavior. So just trying to really get in there and figure out what is the source of their behavior and getting them to stop their behavior. Some people, you can work with them, you can give them resources and services, and they'll stop their behavior. I've seen it with kids, I've seen it with adults. Now, there are some folks, you keep working with them, they may not stop their behavior. You may need to hold on to the hand a little bit longer because they have been socialized in a bad way, and you've got to really spend a lot of time to get them on the right way. So there's still that second tier. Then there's a third tier of people that may just still be doing stuff. Okay, there need to be consequences, but again, there needs to be a balancing of what is the offense versus putting people in jail and things like that. You have to, obviously if they commit severe offenses, then they should be locked up. Like if they keep doing it and they're like murder, rape, things like that. But there are some things that you can really try to work with people. Like, Michelle Alexander talks about in the book, The New Jim Crow, in Portugal, how they put a lot of more resources and money into rehab and treatment and helping people to kick their drug addiction issues, as opposed to just locking them up in a jail where they may not get any resources, and they may dry out of their drugs, but then when they go back in the same community, the same environment, then they pick up where they just left off. So it's really need to do more programming of that nature to help people. So that's it for this first part discussion on reparations. I'm going to come back and we're going to talk about HR 40. And then we're also going to talk about Ta-Nehisi Coates' The Case for Reparations. Thank you.